This is Pastor Jordan Rimmer with this week's Symbol Sermon, a children's sermon, but for everybody. And I want to reflect on several special kinds of crosses. This amazing symbol of the cross and what Jesus accomplishes on the cross has led throughout history to people developing different types of crosses to say different things. A basic cross is a typical Latin cross. But then over time, artists and church leaders developed the cross. So one of the very early on additions to the cross, and very popular over time, is some kind of a budding cross. In other words, the idea is that new life comes from the cross. And you can think about if the cross is made of wood, the value of buds, of new life, of new growth. And so you'll see lots of different kinds of designs of budding crosses, but typically some kind of a design at the tip to represent, at the tips of the cross, to represent new life, new buds coming from the cross. So one very popular version of that is the fleur-de-lis, which has these sort of pointy ends to represent, in particular, people say, tradition says lily flowers, lily buds. But it's just the same idea of a budding cross. Now, sometimes crosses can look like this, like a plus sign. This is typically a Greek cross. The Greek church has tended to use a equilateral cross to represent the cross of Jesus. You might recognize this as the symbol of the red cross, but it's from that same tradition of thinking about the cross being equilateral. Sometimes crosses, you'll see X-shaped crosses like this. And this can represent multiple things. In one way, it represents St. Andrew. Andrew, one of the disciples, is believed to have been crucified on a cross that was this shape, rather than being crucified the same way that Jesus was. And so you'll see this cross, an X associated with St. Andrew. You also just see it as a cross because the word Christ actually starts with an X in Greek. So it's very typical to see an X-shaped cross representing Christ. In fact, very popular, probably the place you've seen it the most is in this symbol, which is not a cross per se, although it does have the Greek cross in it. This is called a Chi, and these are the first two letters of the word Christ, Chi, and then Rho, which looks like a P, but originally in Greek was an R sound. So Christos starts with Chi and Rho, and so that's the most popular place you see the Chi or the X-shaped cross. And you've probably seen these around. A lot of Protestant churches have them. The symbol was used by Constantine in the first Christian Roman Empire, when the empire became Christian. So that's a Chi-Rho, but you can see the Chi, or the St. Andrew's cross, or the Greek cross that's part of that as well. One of the early Christian symbols, too, for the cross is actually an upside-down cross. Now we've been taught that this is bad, right? And certainly there are people that use an upside-down cross in a very negative way to be sort of anti what Christ has done on the cross. But we also have tradition that says that St. Peter was crucified, and that Peter was crucified upside down rather than the way Christ was crucified. And so in the early church, the upside down cross actually stood for St. Peter. This was St. Peter's cross. Sometimes the cross was mixed with other symbols. We find in the Coptic church, the Egyptian sort of African church, this symbol. And this symbol was originally called an ankh. It was an Egyptian hieroglyphic meaning life. And the Egyptian church actually used this, the Coptic church actually used this as their cross and just used the symbol for life as a cross. And finally, one of my favorite ones was the early Christians used to have to disguise their crosses. And so you find an anchor in a lot of early Christian art. As a symbol for a cross, you can see the cross there, that our anchor holds within Christ. But the other thing most people don't know about this kind of anchor is it's also meant to be a ship. Imagine the bottom of the ship with the sail up at the top. That we are meant to be fishers of men. And so for the early church, this was a very important symbol and a way sometimes of disguising the cross. So there are lots of different crosses. We could do a lot more. I would just encourage you to think about the symbols that you see in the church. Think about crosses. Because a cross isn't just a cross. A lot of times a cross is meant to say more about what Christ does. And that's this week's Symbol Sermon.